Okay, I've been told to stand over here because this is where the light works best. You guys are now dark to me. I'm just about to snake you out there. Evening. How you doing?
All right.
Good. All right. I'm expecting a nice northern interactive response rather than down south. So, okay, yeah. So thanks to Roy for his introduction. Brief introduction to me from me. So yes, I kind of have two main parts to my job. I have the Agile side of things, where I'm a trainer and I'm a Scrum coach. And up until a few years ago, I was a Scrum Master and Product Owner on projects and things like that. But before I was a Scrum Master, before I got involved in the Agile space, I was also a leadership coach. So that was the first job that I had. And so those two streams of my work have coexisted for the last 15 or 20 years. And everybody loves a Venn diagram. And if I was going to create a Venn diagram, you'd have my Agile little bubble over here, and you'd have my leadership bubble over here. And then in the middle, obviously, there's quite a bit of overlap where leadership coaching merges into the Agile space. And that's primarily what I'm here to talk to you about today. So Roy also mentioned a couple of books. The first book I wrote was a Scrum book. So it's purely about being a Scrum Master and servant leadership in the Agile space. The second book that I wrote was a coaching book, so didn't mention Agile once. Didn't mention Scrum, anything to do with Agile at all. And so that's what I'm here to talk to you about today, the coaching book, not the Agile book. And it was interesting that I was honoured, as always, to be asked to come and speak at an event. But equally, I was quite flattered and honoured and encouraged and excited to be asked to come and talk about this book rather than the Agile book. Because my I'm not sure, mission might be too strong a word, but what I've been working a lot on over the last 5 years is to try and make that middle bit of the Venn diagram bigger. Not just for me, but for everyone. I wanted to try and get the disciplines and the professionalism of leadership coaching more into the Agile space, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. So what really is Agile coaching is what I'm talking about. So I want to explain why I wrote the Agile, the coach's case, but not the Agile book. Because that's pretty much the number one question I get asked about this book. Why did you write a book that's nothing to do with Agile? I want to talk a little bit about a couple of the traits within the book, because the book it just talks about a number of traits that people have. And at some point during this talk, I want to explore, well, what does that mean for Agile coaching? So that middle bit of the Venn diagram again. I'm hoping it's going to be a little bit more of a conversation than me just standing here and talking. But I guess that kind of depends on you as much as me. So we'll see how that goes. So then, why did I write the coach's case? But there were multiple reasons, but the big ones really were to, like I said, to bring professional coaching into the Agile world and to try and give people a way of explaining what coaching actually is. So I've got two kids, and they get asked regularly, "What does your dad do?" All right, and even if they were just talking about the Scrum side of things, that's kind of embarrassing and difficult enough for them. But the coaching side of things is just as difficult for them. Now, I know Roy pointed out all the letters on there. What I would like you to focus on is the stuff at the bottom. So it says there's Scrum coach, professional coach, leadership coach, personal coach, sports coach. There's a lot of coaching that I do, but each of those is some subtly different and some quite significantly different. So sports coaching, very different to leadership coaching. So to help explain what coaching is, it was very much to get that across. And for some people, to help them sell the idea of coaching within their organisation, and in some cases to themselves, but maybe talk more about that later on. The book is full of tools and techniques. You know, you could try this. This is an exercise you could run if you're coaching somebody or coaching a team, so give people a whole load of tools that they can use. And then two at the bottom, really, which, if I'm being brutally honest, are what this was really about, to try and hold that mirror up to the Agile world, to encourage self-reflection. So all those people out there that have the term coach in their either job title or job description, to say, is how you and your organization and your team, your department, is how you define coach in any way similar to how perhaps others might define the term coach from the professional world of coaching. And then the bit of catharsis, this is me oversharing. I'm a bit of an oversharer. I tell people too much about myself. I apologize for that, but that's just how it is. if you do get round to reading the coach's casebook, basically it's how screwed up is Geoff. So each of those traits is, it's a semi-fictional case study about. So I wrote it with a lovely lady called Kim, who's becoming more popular than me on the Agile circuit now, who gets invited to more talks. I'm not bitter. She's lovely. But it's a collection of her coaching clients, my coaching clients, and a little bit of creative license to make the point. But equally, there's a lot of me and Kim in there as well. So a bit of catharsis to sort of self-therapy in that regard. So yeah, if you want an insight into Geoff's mind, then you can read that. So but what is the coach's casebook? So it doesn't mention Agile, it doesn't mention Scrum once. Okay, so it's nothing to do with Agile. It's purely about coaching individuals, and each of the chapters focuses on a particular trait that these people have. And most of these traits, I'm pretty confident that you will relate to in some regard. Okay, so we're talking about perfectionism. I mean, I could do a quick straw poll, hands up who thinks they're a little bit of a perfectionist, all right? And I'd probably get, about half the room, all right? And some people are proud of being a perfectionist, some people are a little bit guilty about being a perfectionist, depends on the circumstances. I'm not a perfectionist when I'm doing the garden at home, but I am a perfectionist when I'm doing a spell check or things like that. So looking at how does perfectionism play into our strengths, but also if it's out of kilter, how can perfection also be something that traps us, actually limits our performance? And so there's 12 traits, each of them with a story, and we look at how those traits can get a little bit out of balance. And what was working for them, what was helpful in getting them to where they are and achieving the successes that they have achieved, because they're all good things, okay? If they're overdone, if they're out of balance or underdone, then they can actually be harmful. So perfectionism is a good thing, we're going to talk about, but when does it stop being a good thing? All right, and so this is about coaching individuals to help recognize that, to use the strengths, the good parts of those traits, but also recognize when those traits are not helpful anymore. Does that make sense? Cool. Obviously, I haven't got enough time to talk through all of them, and Royd's already prefaced this with, when Geoff finishes, we can go to the pub. So that seed is in your head already. All right, so I'm working against an internal beer clock here, which I'm very aware of. And I'm not drinking because I've got to drive. So this is hard for me. Normally I could just, down one with you. All right, so these are the three that I'm going to talk about today. Interestingly, from my perspective, this was interesting because it was a surprise. Which of the 12 things that I talked about in this book, the one that has by far and away been picked up on the most in the Agile space. And I wasn't expecting it to. Even though studies and statistics will say high numbers of people, 75% of people have experienced imposter syndrome, I wasn't expecting it to have picked up as much notice in the Agile space as it has. So I see lots of people talking about imposter syndrome now, tweeting about it, blogging about it in the Agile space. And that's a great thing. That's the middle bit of the Venn diagram is expanding there. The people-pleasing one I want to talk about, and that's not necessarily a surprise for many people when we talk about what does that mean. And then perfectionism is another one which quite highly correlated in realms like software development and things like this. So I'm just going to talk about those three. If there are any other that you're interested in that we don't get to go into a lot of detail about, there's going to be a little bit of time hopefully at the end where we can have some questions and you can talk about those. But those are the three we're going to talk about. So what is imposter syndrome? I said I was going to have a little bit of a conversation, so let's start that conversation off. When I say imposter syndrome, what does that mean to you? Tell me something that you know about this already.
I'm not good enough.
You're not good enough. Well, okay, I know you are, but you think you're not?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right. Anything else?
Fear of being found out.
Fear of being found out by who?
By people, by everybody.
Everybody. Yeah, it's not about necessarily being found out by hierarchy, by management, by anybody. This idea that if I walk into a room, my imposter syndrome is very, very high, my sort of internal monologue is saying I'm probably the least qualified person in the room. Before you know anybody. Your default approach is everybody else is smarter than me. I don't deserve to be here. All right? And I've got to where I am because of good fortune or circumstance or riding on the coattails of others. And eventually someone's going to turn around and say, what the hell do you think you're doing standing on a stage in front of 50 people talking about psychology? someone's going to come in and yank me out of this room in a minute and say, get back in your corner, Geoff. That kind of thing. All right. It's not humility. Okay. It's not self-deprecation of just sort of lowering expectations by saying, I'm not quite as good as you think I am. It's a genuine internal belief that I'm not good enough. And people really misread me. The people who have faith in me have really got it wrong. And like I said, studies have shown that up to 75% of people have experienced this quite significantly at some point in their career or life. Are there... My clicker? Okay. So yeah, we feel like a fraud, and this word fraudulent it does come through. Assume we're going to be found out. Luck is responsible for success. Success, even though you've got it, is unlikely to be repeated. This is this belief that, okay, maybe we've been lucky once, but I can't count on that happening again. So no matter how many times you are successful, there's always this feel that next time I won't be so lucky. All right. And every promotion makes it worse. So the more that everybody says, oh, good job, you deserve more responsibility, that anxiety level increases. Because you haven't internalized that success yourself. You don't think you have that capability. You're now being put at a higher level, and the consequences are higher. So interestingly, well, like I said, this has been picked up quite a bit. So I'm wondering, given what I've just told you about imposter syndrome, most of that was, I would say, fairly negative. But are there any advantages that you can think of?
Humility.
It drives you to higher performance, I heard.
Humility.
So that even though I said it wasn't humility, it can come across as humility. And certainly it's not arrogance. So we're not going to be running the risk of being arrogant, all right, or cocky, or hot-headed, or anything like this. Okay, so yeah, there's that. We're naturally cautious, if you like.
You rely on people more in the team to...
Yes. Yeah, so we will look to other people, actually respect other people's contributions more, perhaps, which can lead to greater bonding, greater trust, greater rapport. So that's a good thing. Any other advantages?
Sort of
Questioning of?
Well, what you do know, what you know, introspectively as well as...
Yeah. There's a lot of self-reflection that goes on with imposter syndrome, that questioning of yourself, which ties in with that idea of humility and a lack of arrogance. Our default response of, well, I might be wrong here, that's something that comes quite normal. And actually, if we do think that through, and we use that to our advantage of, well, where might I be wrong here? Where might I be found out? Where are the gaps in my knowledge? And we really don't want to be found out, then we work harder and we fill those gaps quicker than other people. So we can actually achieve quite a lot as a result of this. But the anxiety levels are quite high as a result. So there's a big cost to it internally. All right. We talked a lot about the disadvantages, but if you're trying to think at so take those two and think, well, if you're an Agile coach, and we'll come back onto that term in a minute, but anyone who has coaching responsibility, so that could be a Scrum Master, it could even be a product owner, it could be an Agile leader within an organization, someone who's trying to create an Agile culture and foster an Agile team. Why is it important for that person to know about how to handle this?
Because you might have responsibility for someone's development, and if you can understand how they can feel, you can then say, you can relate to them, you can put yourself into their situation.
Okay, so if we're aware this is happening, we can have greater empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we're aware of how people are naturally reacting, the anxieties and the insecurities they have, we can perhaps go some way to reducing them, to increasing their confidence. What are the things might be useful to be aware of? Think of any situations where a team that you've been a part of, knowing that there is now a term for this and these sort of symptoms are out there, and you think, okay, yeah, maybe I didn't realize this was going on, or maybe I did. How if I had changed the way that I dealt with that, or we dealt with that, could we have had a more positive reaction within the team? Yeah.
Probably prevents you from encouraging any kind of blame culture.
Okay.
So, not blaming for failure, but failing to pass failure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And this fear of failure that we're talking about is going to come up in a couple of the other traits as well. It's one of the biggest drivers that we have, fear. Okay, fear is a big driver in humans, and something that we can either use and be aware of it and manage constructively, or if we're really evil, we can manipulate people with. But this idea of fear of failure, and this, what we're looking for in a self-organizing team, some of the things that we're looking for in a self-organizing team is proactivity, right? We want people to take the initiative. We want people to step up and be self-managing rather than defer to somebody else. One of the things we need in order to do that is confidence in ourselves, all right? And confidence in our teammates, but that comes later. But first of all, confidence in ourselves. The willingness to take risks. So there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of vulnerability involved in self-management, taking responsibility, stepping up, putting your hand up to make an estimate with incomplete information, to be able to deliver something at the end of an iteration and ask for feedback on that is quite daunting at the best of times. But if you're constantly thinking, as well as I might not be perfect in what I've done, it may well reflect on me as a person and give someone an opportunity to actually call me out on what I'm overly anxious about my own performance and ability. It's very difficult to expect, or very, very hard, or even unfair perhaps, to ask a team to do that without being aware of their anxieties that are driving their behaviour. So an Agile coach being aware of that, but also Agile coaches have imposter syndrome. How might that manifest itself in the Agile coach? How might that impact their behaviour?
Not being too confident about asserting their experience or opinion.
Okay, so not being confident about asserting their experience or their opinion, and that can work both ways, all right? So I've got an idea, I'd like to try something, my gut's telling me this, but I'm not really sure that I can pull it off, so I'll let it go. Or I don't necessarily have the confidence to broach the elephant in the room with the team. Will they finally twig that I'm not really up to the job? Or equally the other way around, that I'm so insecure about my role that I don't trust the team to see my value unless I exert my authority. Does that make sense? To push too hard to try and get some validation of my value that I'm adding to the team. So being aware of these things is absolutely critical. This idea of self-awareness and self-reflection, important at the team level and the Agile coach level. Agile coaches, because of what they're doing in terms of trying to develop self-organizing teams rather than implement hierarchical procedures, have to model behaviors. Okay? And one of the big behaviors that an Agile coach needs to model is self-reflection, self-awareness. This is something we need to encourage in a team in order for them to be self-managed. And if we're not doing that ourselves, how can we expect other people to do that? Otherwise, it's become basically self-organize like this. Self-organize as I tell you, all right? Which is contradictory. So what can you do? Well, one of the first steps that we need to do with someone who's really struggling with imposter syndrome is just to help them objectively look at their successes and get them into the habit of internalizing and owning those successes. All right. So I want you to do something for me. I'm not going to ask you to do this in front of everybody else, but just someone else in the room. What I want you to do is I want you to think back and come up with, let's say, around about three things, three events, 3 achievements, 3 successes in your personal or professional life that you're proud of, that you've done, all right, that you're proud of. It could be that you've achieved a certain level of proficiency in coaching children's cricket. Why did that come to mind? Because I'm doing my level 2 next month. It could be that you swam 104 lengths of a pool non-stop. All right. It could be anything. It could be you overcome physiotherapy, whatever, something that you've done that you are personally proud of. Okay, the other person's not going to comment on it. They're just going to listen and just take that information in. 3 things that you can, and then you're going to tell somebody else in the room, and they will tell you their 3 things. That's all I want you to do. I'm not going to ask anybody to tell anybody else. You're not going to have to stand up and share it in front of the room, but just 2 or 3 things, a couple of minutes. That's all I want you to do. Over to you. Thank you. Thank you for that. Like I said, I'm not going to ask anybody to share their successes with the rest of the room, but did anybody feel uncomfortable doing that? Even though you knew you weren't going to be judged on that, even though you knew you weren't going to be pulled up on that, just talking about yourself and what you're proud of, that's not just a British thing. I mean, it's very easy to say it's a British thing, but it's not just a British thing. Maybe it is bigger in Britain. I haven't really done a study, but it's uncomfortable. But that's often the first step in bringing this back into balance, being able to and hear from somebody else what you've done and learn to accept feedback about your qualities and take some time to not just immediately deflect that. Okay, so things to look out for when people say, "Oh, you did a good job there." What's your reaction? Is your reaction, "Oh yeah, but"? All right, and as soon as you hear those words, you think, "Okay, all right, what's going on here?" Learn to accept compliments. And help, and I know there's lots of retrospective techniques around things like appreciation. It's just teams get into the habit of being able to appreciate what others have done, but also appreciate that others are appreciative of what you bring. Now that's often overlooked. So this idea of this career timeline is a technique that we do with a lot of people, just actually get people stood up and in the moment, a little bit more than just sitting there and talking to somebody. Physically occupy the space of their career timeline. So this is 1995 when I graduated. Nobody thought I ever would graduate, so I was quite pleased with that. Okay, and now moving on to 2001, and this happens, and moving along the timeline and feeling like they're in that position accentuates that feeling. And we get into the habit of that. If we don't, all right, self-management definitely suffers. Okay, we don't have the confidence to try new things. We don't have the confidence to step up and take responsibility, to take the risks that are required for teamwork and self-management. All right. So that's the first one. Second one, people pleasing. This is again probably the second most common thing that people will associate with. So when I say people pleasing, and I've got a little picture on there which gives you a hint, but what kind of things? What does this say to you? What do you think I'm talking about here?
Taking on too much?
Taking on too much. Okay, so people ask you to do something, your immediate reaction is, yeah, okay. Yeah.
What people want to hear rather than the truth.
Say what people want to hear rather than the truth. Yeah, and willing to have this. Let people walk over you, so they can take advantage of your good nature. Anything else?
Procrastinating, dealing with difficult things.
Yeah, so I know something's coming on, but I don't want it. That's conflict. Something might go wrong with that. Someone might not like the outcome, so let's just put it to one side. It could be a conversation, it could be a decision, it could be anything. Yeah. So, people pleasing is a really interesting one, and you get into the heart of this. It's a good thing. Okay, it is a good thing to want people to like you. All right, to do good things for others. This is a good thing, and the world would be a terrible place if there were no people pleasers. All right, but equally, it can go too far. And for a lot of people, it does. And we don't realise it. I like the quote on the wall there. It says, "The question isn't who's going to let me, it's who's going to stop me." And one of the things with these 12 traits things is actually a lot of the people that are stopping you are you, all right? Because you're unaware of the things that you're doing that are actually hindering your performance. So people pleasing is something that can easily get out of hand. And so we talk about here, if you find there's a problem in the room, someone's got a challenge, someone's struggling, you have this urge to step in and rescue. All right. I don't like seeing people struggle. I want to offer help. I'm going to come in. I'm going to save the situation. Not because I want to be seen as the knight in shining armour, but genuinely, I just want this done. I don't like people who are unhappy. And so we will overcommit. We will step in and solve problems that aren't really ours to solve. A lot of people say I'm uncomfortable with conflict. Is that a phrase that you've heard yourself say? I don't like conflict. I like tension. I don't like arguments. There's usually a high people-pleasing tendency to that. Again, good thing. No one really wants to have an argument for the sake of it. Just if you find yourself enjoying conflict, you probably want to have a look at the mirror as well. All right, but deliberately avoiding it. I was coaching somebody a while ago who said, I'm starting my role as a Scrum Master, and I know I know one of the things I need to focus on is keeping the team happy. All right. I'll make sure they're not arguing. And you can see the logic in that, right? Because a happy team is a productive team. But all good teams in the history of sports teams, software teams, project teams, they all have the ability to have an argument. Right? It's a deliberate choice of words there. They have an ability to have an argument. They can have an argument constructively. They can see different sides of an argument. They can have make very passionate cases. They can argue as if they're right, but also listen as if they're wrong. And so actually as a Scrum Master, we want to encourage that. As an Agile coach, we want to encourage that. You can't effectively self-manage if you're ignoring a lot of the options that are available to you purely to avoid an uncomfortable discussion. There are uncomfortable conflicts if we're people-pleasing, constantly apologising. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry you feel this way. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm sorry apologies for the delayed email response, these kinds of things, we talked about knee-jerk responses of yes, sure, so we end up with overloading. Everyone else comes first, our needs comes last, and then constantly looking for reassurance. Is everything all right? Did I upset you? Who do I need to apologise today? That kind of thing. So these are perhaps some of the downsides of it, but there are advantages as well. Okay, so thinking as an Agile coach, let's skip to the third question. Thinking as an Agile coach, why might it be important to us to be aware of people-pleasing tendencies within our team?
So if you're coaching Agile, there's a structure that you need to get across, and if the team is wanting to do various different things,
Okay.
you can't let them get away with that.
Right, and that's a double-edged comment, which I'm going to address one edge of it, and I'm going to come back to the other edge of it slightly later. But this idea of, well, there is a certain amount of freedom within an Agile approach, but not complete freedom. So there are times when actually a self-managing team does need to apply and fit within and adhere to constraints and rules, whether that be something as simplistic as, we're only going to have 15 minutes in our daily Scrum. That's a rule, it's a constraint of an Agile process. If the team have decided to adopt that, then that's something they need to do. And someone needs to be able to say, well, stop. We're breaking our rules here. All right. So there may be times when we need to have that discussion within an Agile team, yes. Any other situations we need to be aware of that?
It'd be really bad if your product owner was saying yes to everything.
Yeah. All right, a product owner has to be able to say no, right? Otherwise, how do they prioritize? How do we ever make any decisions or any progress? How's the project ever going to end? So if they're constantly saying yes, that's going to be a problem for us, for them, for the organization. Any other examples where we need to be aware of this? Yeah.
You may have people pleasers in your team who take on too much.
Yeah.
And get overloaded and burnt out.
Yep. So overcommitment, that could be over optimism. It could be just we can't say no to things, and so we burn ourselves out, or perhaps compromise quality in the product to meet those unrealistic commitments that we've made. And if we are people pleasers equally, we don't want conflict, and we don't want to be seen to be letting people down. So we won't want to share that message until really, really late, until we absolutely, probably later than we have to. All right. So that idea of transparency is probably going to go out the window. The idea of sharing the hard realities that we talked about earlier on is going to be quite difficult. So we're going to be looking for uncertainty. We're going to be looking for anxiety. We're going to be looking for tension. We might even be able to hold the mirror up to the team and say, guys, seriously? I mean, I had one team, this was a long time ago, one team where the product owner turned up to the sprint review and said, seriously, guys, you need to be more realistic. You need to tell me the truth. Every sprint, and he had the data, okay, so he got up on the whiteboard and he wrote down, this is the amount of story points that you said you were going to do in sprint 1, this is what you did. This is what you said you're going to do in sprint 2, this is what you did. Sprint 3, what you did. And every single one of them was about 20% more than what they actually managed to achieve. And he said, it's not that you're a bad team, all right? If you'd have said you'd have done this stuff, I'd have been all right with it. But what you've done is said you could do this, and I've had to go to my stakeholders and effectively overpromise, and then you've let them down. Tell me what you can do. But that was a really hard thing for them to do. They genuinely wanted to please. They wanted to help the product owner in their role, but they weren't helping. What about an Agile coach who has a strong people-pleasing tendency? What might they need to be aware of?
Well, you're not going to tell them the truth and where they need to improve, because you'd be scared of hurting their feelings, and the whole reason you're there is to help them improve and see things that they need to work on. And
Yeah.
you're saying, the hair's all right, don't worry, it'll be fine. Or,
My hair.
well, everybody's hair's
Yeah.
all right, so, that
I was a bit worried about my hair. Thanks.
that kind of thing. So you're not addressing the actual problem. You're
Yeah.
just actually hurting them more by not telling them what they need to do.
Yeah. So avoiding the feedback, the real feedback, and also that's magnified, right? Because there's that one specific instance of the feedback not being true, but also then everybody's looking at that and they know. Okay, people know when you're dressing it up, when you're buttering things, when you're sugarcoating things, when you're avoiding the real issue just to stay nice, stay on good terms. And that's then copied, consciously, subconsciously. That's kind of expected behaviour that's rolled out within the team. So it's magnified, and everything that an Agile coach does, everything that an Agile coach doesn't do, has a massive impact on self-organising behaviour within the team. And so they have to run the risk of being slightly unpopular at times. But how can we get to a point where we're comfortable doing that is the challenge that Agile coaches face. Now, this is where I said the double-edged sword to the initial comment of there may be rules that we need to follow as a team. And they might not be rules that are comfortable to address. Agile coaching is different to professional coaching in a number of ways that I'm going to come back to, but one of them could be around that area. Okay, so in terms of the ownership of the rules, where does that lie? Okay, so Agile teams have perhaps less ownership of the rules compared to the Agile coach, in contrast to a professional coaching engagement. All right, just hold on to that thought for a minute. I'll come back to that explicitly towards the end. So what can we do? Okay, well, we need to get comfortable with saying no. Product owners need to be comfortable saying no. Developers need to be comfortable saying no. Agile coaches need to be comfortable saying no. You know, can we drop our daily Scrum? Do we really have to have it every day? No, we can't drop it. No, we need to do this every day, and this is why. Right. So there are a few things we can do. A natural knee-jerk reaction was one of the common symptoms of people pleasers. Without thinking, without giving themselves time, their default response is, yeah, all right then, sure. So stall, buy yourself some time. Just get into the habit of, let me get back to you on that. So I can think things through and come to a decision from my head rather than my gut instinct. So stall, adjust the boundaries to just gradual exposure. So taking a little bit more ownership. Setting your boundaries just a little bit further than they were before. So the idea of, if you've got a phobia of spiders, maybe you can be in a room when that's in a cage and it's locked at the other end of the room. That kind of gradual exposure, and slowly we can move it forward, slowly we can unlock the cage. Maybe we can get to a point where we're touching it equally with saying no. How can we adjust our boundaries gradually rather than going cold turkey and turning into an arse? I'll be careful of my language, I'm being filmed. Let people know that they are allowed to disagree. And actually, I see a lot of teams will actually use the idea. I'm a big fan of debating. I've just got my son to go to debating club. I think every child should go to debating club. I think every human being should do some kind of debating practice. If you're going to be part of a collaborative team, we need to be able to disagree constructively. We need to be able to know that disagreement is okay as long as it's respectful. And being able to make an argument for something you don't believe in, I think, is quite important. All right? We need to have that dissent within our team. So I've seen a lot of teams that will have debate retrospectives, debate-style retrospectives, just to allow us to consider different alternatives with passion. All right? Respectful passion that we know we're arguing something we don't believe in, but we can do that. It's okay. The world's not going to fall apart. All right? We're not going to end up with a fist fight. We can do that. Network audit is a lot more specific to individual coaching, but actually it's quite useful to be aware of with our Agile teams as well. So a network audit would be actually looking at the people that you surround yourselves with. All right, so how many of those people actually take advantage of your people-pleasing nature? And whether you need to reduce that. How many people are actually helpful to you? How many people support you? How many people encourage you to set and keep your own limits? How many people are looking out for you? What kind of composition do we have within our Agile team of people pleasers and people who shirk, these kinds of things, and being aware of that? What about the people who are surrounding the Agile team? All right? Are people taking advantage of the people-pleasing nature of the team? The average developer thinks they're above average, right? We all know this. The average Agile team overcommits. Right? Our estimates are terrible. Some people out there are aware of that, and some product owners are aware of the consequences on them. It looks good in the short term, but they know it's going to hit them in the medium term. Some aren't aware of that and will take advantage of that. Are we aware of the access that these people have to the team? And the one at the bottom there, offer no excuses, I find quite interesting. And this is very difficult for people pleasers to do, because when I say, I'm going out on Friday. Can you look after my kids? And they'll say, oh, no, I can't because I've got to take the dog for a walk. So it's a grasping at straw, but they feel they have to have some reason to say no. By offering that as a reason, it's saying to me, okay, so if I can solve your dog walking problem, you can look after my kids. All right? And that's opened the door for people to push. And what we found is that if you can offer 3 excuses. Oh yeah, okay, maybe I've got the dog walking problem, but then I've got another problem. All right, I've got to do this. If I may well try and say no 3 times, but after that, I've lost my energy. It feels rude. Okay, it's just easier to say yes. So don't offer excuses. It's really difficult, but the more excuses you offer, the more likely you are to eventually say yes. Right. To get teams into a habit, you have the right to say no. Right. Our third trait, how am I doing on time? Okay. Third trait that I want to talk about, perfectionism. Again, the third one that most people will be aware of. They will either put their hand up and say, yeah, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. Some people say, oh yeah, I'm a perfectionist and I'm proud of that. I wear the perfectionist badge. Or some people will if you're not, then you'll certainly know somebody that is. You'll be aware of this kind of stuff. So now, perfectionism is an interesting one, especially in the software development industry, especially when we're talking about Agile. All right, so everybody's got a favorite principle of the Agile Manifesto. I'm not going to ask you what yours is. But the idea of it not having a perfect design, having good design, continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. That's my favorite, because it talks specifically about good design rather than perfect design. But for a lot of people, that's really difficult, right? And I was actually reading an article by the CTO of the Daily Mail. It was a LinkedIn blog post saying that Agile doesn't work, it never has. All right, it was quite a bold statement. All right. I'm on camera. But you can draw your own conclusions. But the culture of an organisation is going to have a massive impact on whether Agile works and whether you actually trust people to do a good job. Whether you actually believe in the human nature, positive aspect of human nature, will have a massive impact on whether self-organisation and self-management takes hold. But this idea of unrelenting standards is a big driver behind perfectionism. You know, it's a right angle or it's a wrong angle. All right, these kinds of things. It's got to be perfect, and get into the OCD type side of things, which there are people out there that say there's a high correlation of OCD and software developers. I haven't studied that myself, but there's this idea of having perfect code and things like this and perfect designs. And I've definitely spoken with UX designers who say, I don't want the developers getting their dirty hands on my designs until they're perfect. I've had someone say that to me. So I know there is a certain element of this in the software and the Agile space. But this idea that we're never satisfied unless it's absolutely perfect, and we gold plate things and we keep going and we keep pushing, is a big concern of the product owner side of organizations. You can't trust development teams because either they're shoddy or they gold plate, which is ironic, really. I mean, it's two extremes of the same coin they're worried about. And it's very difficult for human beings to simplify, and that's my second favourite principle of the Agile Manifesto. Simplicity is essential, right? The art of maximising the amount of work not done. So how can you maintain technical excellence while keeping things simple is a big concern for many people. So perfectionism is a big thing in the Agile space, in my opinion. Advantages, though? Advantages to perfectionism?
You get perfect stuff.
Do we? Because, and this is me.
Attention to detail, isn't it, and things like that.
Attention to detail is a good thing, right?
Very conscientious.
And this is one of the Daily Mail CTO's concerns, is that you just get crap, shoddy code that people don't pay attention to. You're constantly iterating on something that's never finished. You never have a think things through. It's all by the seat of your pants. This idea of that cowboy coding. I haven't heard that argument that loudly for quite a while. But there we go. But this idea, well, you should get something really, really good, okay? If you've got you're really conscientious, okay, your standards are really, really high, and if your standards are really high, it actually encourages other people to step up as well. And they say, well, okay, well, yeah, fair enough. Okay, you're this conscientious. I'm not going to be sloppy either because I don't want to be seen as the shoddy one, All right? And actually there's justification for me putting in that extra effort because these are the standards that we set. So there's definitely advantages there in terms of quality. What other advantages might there be to perfectionism? So yeah, the reliability, the maintainability, and that conscientious nature in terms of maintenance as well, right? Okay, maybe we can accept the fact that stuff happens. It's probably someone else's fault, not ours. But if it does happen, then I don't want that to be against me or what I've built. So I will work hard and eradicate that. We don't tolerate anything that slips through the net. So the conscientiousness. It's an interesting one in terms of standards, because standards can work the other way. So in terms of disadvantages, if you know that the quality bar is up here, and you don't believe you can meet it, a lot of people will, rather than try and not meet that bar, they'll check out. And they will procrastinate. And they would rather say I ran out of time than I couldn't meet the quality bar. Find all sorts of reasons to procrastinate because they don't think they can make it. All right? And if you couple that with the idea of imposter syndrome, where we don't think we're good enough, all right, you've got a lot of demotivation. You've got to think, well, I can never meet that, so what's the point? And even if I do meet it, all they do is raise the bar, because if it was easy enough for you to meet, it obviously wasn't perfect enough. All right? And perfectionists do this to themselves. Once they meet the bar, well, it couldn't have been high enough because I met it. They're actually writing the rules of the game against themselves.
With that, both ends of it seem to feed imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So the people that are trying to be perfectionists and reach perfection are then going to potentially feed imposter syndrome in themselves, with the people that don't want to are just going to go, well, I'm a fraud anyway.
Yeah.
Give up.
Yeah, and that's possibly one of the reasons why we're looking at 70 to 75% of people that will look at that at some point. But if they either check out of the task, or in many cases, sadly, they'll check out of the team or the organisation. Burnout, fear of failure are associated with these levels. But there's loads and loads of stuff on perfectionism out there, not just in the Agile space. But really important to know, because what are we aiming for is the question, really. Perfection is a good thing to aim for if we can cope with the consequences, and in our case, the inevitable consequences of not making it. So when I say in our cases, in the Agile space, we're kind of being explicit in saying perfect is not possible because things are changing so frequently and there are so many unknowns. So we're constantly striving for excellent, not perfect. And there's a difference. All right? And this term, adaptive perfectionism, as opposed to maladaptive perfectionism. Adaptive perfectionism is we're aiming for excellence, and we can cope with the fact that it will never be perfect. And we're continuously looking to maintain excellence, which, again, feeds back to why that Agile principle is my favorite, because it talks about excellence and good design rather than perfection. All right? In some situations, perfection is achievable. It is something we should be aiming for. All right? But I would suggest in an Agile space where we are working with incomplete information, frequently changing requirements, lots of unknowns, perfection is not achievable and is destructive. So Agile coaches need to be aware of that. We want that conscientiousness, but we don't want the destructive side of things. Does this make sense? Okay, cool. So here's some of you may have seen this picture before. I've used it before in my talks. My son is now 10, and at some point he will realise. So he's just, he's got a YouTube channel and things. So now he will, at some point he'll Google Daddy, and he will see Daddy's done a talk, and he's used his picture. If he can get to 35 minutes into my talk, he will, which he probably won't, so I'm safe. But he will eventually realise that I'm using this, and he'll hate me for it. But this is a picture he did maybe when I think he was about 3 or 4, and he came rushing into the kitchen. He said, "Daddy, look what I've done! Look what I've done!" I said, "That's brilliant. That's brilliant." And he said, "What is it?" And there are many answers to this, all right? And I got lucky, all right? It's a spaceship. I knew he was into spaceships at the time. So it's a good thing. Yeah, it's a brilliant spaceship. I can tell it's a fantastic spaceship. But other people, it's not. Other people, and I ask them what that is, they'll say it's a toothbrush or a jellyfish or something. And equally, it could be, all right? Now, my question then is this perfect? Well, obviously, it's not perfect, because it's not, an exact blueprint for the design of, interstellar space travel. Right? It's not perfect in that regard. But to the dad of a 4-year-old, it is. All right? And to the 4-year-old themselves, it is, unless they've developed imposter syndrome. So we look at this, and I think, yeah, that's great, that's perfect, that is absolutely perfect. And the next question he asked me was, Daddy, will you come and draw with me? And I said, no, I can't draw. All right, now, because I know I can't draw perfectly. I'm judging myself, I could probably draw like that, right? But would I be happy with that? Is that excellent? Is that good enough? So I'm a terrible father, right? So I've now planted in his seed, if you can't draw perfectly, you shouldn't draw at all. All right, I planted that seed in his head. Thankfully, he ignores me, as most people should. But the point that I want to make here is that failure and perfection is relative. It's subjective, depending on the context. All right, so if perfection is relative and is subjective, then so is failure. And this is about redefining failure. You'll hear this phrase redefining failure a lot in your teams, in your organizations. We need to look at the assumptions that we're making, often unconsciously, about why perfection is important to us. What are we worried will happen if we are imperfect? Okay, are we going to get judged? Are we going to lose a promotion? Are people going to think badly of us? Are we going to think badly of us? What assumptions are behind that drive for perfection? And if we can explicitly state them, then we have a chance of challenging them. So that's what a coach will hopefully do. They will help people see what the assumptions are behind their perfectionism, hopefully challenge them to channel those drives towards excellence rather than perfectionism, and insist on improvement and pursuing of excellence. This idea of changing what failure means to us will help us bring that perfectionism trait back into balance. And that's where I'm going with all this stuff, really, because perfectionism is a good thing, perfectionism is a bad thing. Imposter syndrome is a good thing, imposter syndrome is a bad thing. All right? It's about finding that middle ground, using the positive side of it, mitigating the negative side of things. All right? And this bringing it together. And that's what, for me, coaching is all about. It's not about Agile is good or Agile is bad, or Waterfall is good, Waterfall is bad, perfectionism is good. It's about finding out what's right and helping others know when that's not in balance. All right? The key to self-management is self-awareness and self-regulation. So a coach's primary job, in my personal opinion, is to help the people that they're coaching be aware of those traits and be aware when they are out of balance, how that is helping or harming them, and give them some tools and techniques to bring them back into balance. And bear in mind, this is from sort of leadership coaching, personal coaching rather than Agile coaching, but looking at, well, where does this start? Where's the first example of perfectionism that you can think of? What assumptions are you making about that? Tell me about how that has played out throughout your life. Are there times when you aren't overly perfectionist? Are there times when you are really, really perfectionist? What's the difference? What's happening in those situations where you are able to control it and where you are less able to control it? Can you take elements of that and apply it to this situation? So thinking about the bigger picture there. What alternatives do we have available to us? What options do we have when thinking about bringing perfectionism into balance? Can we think about this in a different way? What could we try, perhaps? And then putting some new behaviors into practice, into place, trying something new, making some commitment to trying something new, and then looking for some evidence that new behavior is adding some value to them. All right, that's a model for helping people bring things back into balance. And of course, there are specific tools and techniques that we can use, but that overall model of balance is something that I try and encourage people to at least think about. Right. So what really is an Agile coach? I mean, that was the title of the talk. The Scrum Guide, there is no Agile coach. All right, so if you're doing Scrum, there's no Agile coach. Yet most of the organizations that I work in and you guys work in, there will be the role of an Agile coach, right? You come across this, you see job adverts for it, usually more highly paid than a Scrum Master or something like that. But as far as Scrum is concerned, there isn't one. Just 3 roles. So that's an interesting starting point. Other Agile methods may have the term Agile coach, others don't. I'm a member of the ICF, the International Coach Federation, so I was a member of that before I was a member of the Scrum Alliance. That has nothing to do with Agile, although I'm trying to bridge the two worlds. So the ICF, the International Coach Federation, defines coaching in a number of different ways, but I'm just pulling out a few definitions that I think are of interest when looking at this from an Agile perspective. So the ICF says, individuals or teams, we believe they are capable of generating their own solutions. Okay, if we're coaching them, we believe they are capable of generating their own solutions, and the coach will supply supportive, discovery-based approaches and frameworks. So they just give them something that they can use to identify their own solution. It's not about finding my solution, all right, or the right solution. But everyone that we're coaching has that capacity. That is an underpinning belief of coaching from the ICF. Partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. So it's not about saying this is what you need to do. It's not about saying this is what the process says has to happen, or this is what is expected of you. Right? Thought-provoking and creative process that inspires. So a coach should inspire people to think new things, to be creative about how they're doing things. The coaching process does not include advising. As far as the ICF is concerned, a coach should not advise. They should not counsel. All right? Instead, they're looking at focusing those people, individuals or groups, on setting and reaching their own objectives. Okay? I still come back to that double-edged sword. There may be rules in your Agile process that an Agile coach is responsible for enforcing. That is at odds with the ICF definition of coaching. That's a challenge. All right. What else have we got? Unlike athletic development, so I said I'm a sports coach as well, there are some differences there. Professional coaching does not focus on behaviours that are being executed poorly. Does not focus on behaviours that are being executed poorly, according to the ICF, or incorrectly. Instead, the focus is on identifying opportunities for development based on individual strengths and capabilities. So focus on what you're doing well and think, well, could I do more of that? Could I apply some of that somewhere else? All right. So in essence, if we were being brutally honest, your kid comes home with a report card of 8 A's, a B and an F. We don't care about the F. Okay? We just focus on the strengths, and then maybe the F will increase by applying those strengths to other situations. All right. That's an interesting one. How many retrospectives have you been to where we focused on where did we screw up this sprint? Not explicitly. I don't expect you to turn up and say that's the question we're going to answer, but we focus on the problems and where we've screwed up more than we focus on our successes and our strengths. In general, don't we? Now, I'm not here to say that this is something that we should be following to the letter, because there is a lot of benefit, I believe, personally. Even though I'm an ICF accredited coach, I still think there's a lot of benefit in looking at and maybe addressing some of our weaknesses. Okay? If we don't address the fact that we write terrible code, are we ever going to be a successful software team? No, so we probably need to address that. The question then is that the place of the coach? So ICF would say no. ICF would say the coach provides the framework for the team to identify that and trusts that they will find a solution to addressing it. But most organizations say, well, the Agile coach is responsible for that. And that puts the Agile coach into a potential conflict of interest, I would say. So the Scrum Guide versus the ICF. The Scrum Guide says that the Scrum Master, this is because they don't have an Agile coach, okay, they expect the Scrum Master to be a coach. The Scrum Master is responsible for ensuring that the Scrum team adheres to Scrum theory, practice, and rules, all right? That they are responsible for planning Scrum implementations within the organization. Causing change, not facilitating change, causing change that increases the productivity of the Scrum team, all right? Against the ones that we've already talked about. Generating their own solutions does not include advising, setting and reaching their own. So the Scrum Guide talks about the Scrum Master being a coach, and I believe that the Scrum Master is a coach, but I think there's a big difference between how Scrum defines a coach, how Agile coaches are defined, and how professional coaches are defined. Right? And I try and operate those two worlds. I believe that a lot of people who are in that role, some of them aren't aware of that dichotomy, they aren't aware of that conflict. Some of them are aware of it, just don't know how to square the circle. They actually believe in this stuff, but are being asked to do this stuff. In its worst examples, organizations, they call their people coaches, but actually what they expect, what they've hired for, are managers or consultants. And what that leads to is, do Agile this way. Self-organize like this. All right? Which is contradictory. But it's not explicitly contradictory. It's something that everyone's kind of aware, that doesn't feel right. But what do we do about it? Now, I don't necessarily have an answer here, but what I am trying to do is, what I have been trying to do the last few years is build awareness. Firstly, that there is a potential conflict there. And secondly, to provide some tools and techniques from the world of professional coaching that's been dealing with this for years into the Agile space. So how can we build up those self-coaching techniques within the team so that they can coach each other, that they're aware of the potential conflicts within that role? Because who we are is how we coach, and who we are is defined by our role and our responsibilities as well. Right. Most coaches, that's probably very harsh, but it's quite late and you're going to go to the pub soon anyway, so you'll forget this bit. Most coaches are unaware of the impact they have on the team, in what they do and what they say and what they don't say, how they act. Esther Derby explained this a lot better than I ever did, so I'll give her credit for this. She was telling me how dogs are quite useful at this, right? Because you can say to a dog sitting there, we can beat this out, right? You're an ugly little shit, aren't you? You're an ugly little shit. In a nice voice, and the dog will sit there wagging its tail. Because it's listening to the music, it's not listening to the words. And people in organisations, I'm not saying people in organisations are animals or dogs or anything like that, but they listen to the music. When there is a conflict, they listen to the music. Okay, if there is a mixed message, they think, well, what's behind the words? And while we may be saying we're agile, we maybe say we're agile coaches, but if the music behind those words is saying something different, then we lose faith in the whole process. So what can you do? Well, my hope is that I'm looking at professional agile coaching, the facilitators of team self-actualization. That's what I believe an agile coach should be. We have this dichotomy of the ownership of the agenda. Okay, that's the big one. But for me, that's all about, well, what does this team want? Okay, does the team want to be an agile team? Does the team want to be a self-managing team? If they do, then they buy into that process and they buy into the role of this person being the facilitator of their self-actualization. If they don't buy into wanting to be a self-organizing team for whatever reason, then that person's got some work on the rest of the organizational culture and the environment they're operating in first before the team can buy into that. They're respectful of where the team is, okay, so they don't expect them to be able to self-manage completely from the start, but equally they're respectful of where the team can be. They genuinely believe in the potential of the team to self-manage. They believe that is possible, almost inevitable, but they don't expect it overnight. They walk the talk, so they're aware of any mixed messages. They accept their impact on the team. They own that impact on the team. They're rigorous in their self-reflection, so constantly, and this is a big, for me, probably the biggest thing that I was hoping people would take from the coach's case, but they haven't, but that's life, is the idea of in professional coaching, as with all other sort of helping professions like therapy and things like this, there's an element of supervision. So the coaches have coaches. They walk the talk. So they're expecting other people to reflect on their behaviour, but those coaches are expected to do that themselves. And very few organisations have an Agile coach support network or a Scrum Master support network or anything in there where people are actually expected to reflect themselves on how they're working and the conflicts of interest they may have. So that rigorous self-reflection should be part of what we're doing, and that discipline of supervision, that regularity as well, is where I think we need to be going. Now, I was challenged, I was sent a speaker pack. Now, I was told the stated goal of Agile Yorkshire is to be champions of no-nonsense software delivery. I was pretty sure before I turned up that I was going to fail on that, because I don't talk about software delivery really. Okay, this is about coaching. And I think the last time I was here, I admitted that I do have a certificate somewhere that says I can program in Visual Basic, but you wouldn't want me on your team. All right, I'm not really a software guy. So really, just as the coach's casebook is nothing to do with Agile, it's nothing to do with software, I would say, but then I would say that, all right, it's everything to do with Agile and it's everything to do with software delivery. I think if you're expecting a team, a software development team, to self-manage, to self-organize, to operate within an Agile environment, to cope with the natural inevitable imperfection, to cope with the natural human anxieties around imposter syndrome and people-pleasing that are prevalent within human beings, then we need to know about this stuff, and we need to have some tools that will help us manage that, and also to coach others to manage that. So although, okay, I haven't taught you anything that will make you a better software developer, hopefully it's a part of the conversation that needs to have. Our audience does like detailed engineering. I haven't got any detailed engineering for you, all right? So I guess I failed on that one. Speakers should try to explain how their chosen topic improves software development outcomes. I hope that I have, all right? But I don't know. That's what these feedback forms are for, I suppose. My my contact details, are they on this slide here? Yes, my contact details. So my email address, my Twitter ID, I'm more than happy for you to contact me through anything like that, LinkedIn, anything you want. Send me messages. I'm more than happy to answer questions that you thought I didn't want to ask this in front of everybody else, or I wish I'd remembered this as I was going out the door. I set no service level agreement about how quickly I respond, but I do guarantee to respond. I'm back in Leeds next month, running a CSM course, bit of a pitch, at the Marriott. Trying to bring more training to Leeds rather than force everybody out to London all the time. See how that goes. I made a stupid mistake of scribbling my name in the inside cover of a few copies of my book, which apparently reduces the value of them. So I'm selling them at a reduced rate. I've only got as many as I could carry, so there's only a few copies here. If you want to buy them at a reduced rate of 10 quid, they'll be available at the back. Other than that, it was a genuine pleasure to talk with you rather than talk at you. And yeah, you're free to go to the pub or finish off the booze here.